you're a minority in this country and you don't subscribe to your emotions, if you want to have intellectual discussions and you want to have a debate, there's no place for you on the left. In fact, you will be rejected. In fact, they will actively try to destroy you in the way that they have tried to destroy me over the last 2 years. Is it really possible that a man that was loved by the media, Donald J. Trump, they loved him, loved by Black America. Every hip-hop song that I listened to growing up, they wanted to be like Trump. Beyonce and Jay-Z were sipping poolside at Mar-a-Lago. He was the dream. Obama said that the American dream is to be like Trump. Was it really possible that within 24 hours of declaring his candidacy for the White House, he became a racist, bigoted, homophobic, sexist, rapist at one point, right? Was that really possible? And I said, of course, no, it's not possible. How on earth is it possible that a party that instituted slavery, Jim Crow laws, racial terrorism, and the KKK has the black vote? How is it possible? We gave up culture. The right gave up culture. That's how it's possible. That's how the left was able to do this. We gave up culture. You certainly aren't going to win any accolades in Hollywood if you write a script and the protagonist is a part of the nuclear family unit. In fact, you'll probably be chased out of Hollywood if you start to perpetuate conservative principles. That's because the left has invested, they've infected, and they've infested culture at every single layer. This is why Kamala Harris, who will never ever be president of the United States, is talking about Tupac and Biggie music that never came out, which she claims she smoked marijuana to in college. Because she thinks that black people are stupid, and the way that she's going to appeal to us is just by saying, I smoke pot and I listen to hip hop music. How insulting is that? This is why Hillary Clinton, who is still not the president of the United States, right? It's great. This is why she offered my community hot sauce, if you guys remember. Hot sauce as a reason to vote for her. She offered us hot sauce, a Jay-Z, and a Beyonce concert. She never talked to us about policies. The left never talks about policies because their policies have failed Black America for the last 60 years. But things are starting to change, and they're starting to change because, and I'll tell you guys what the magic secret is. I'll tell you how I've been able to transform so many hearts and minds in the minority community. The secret is that I simply tell them the truth. The truth is on our side as conservatives. America is not a racist country. The people that continue to tell us that have a vested interest in racism. In fact, they're actively now importing Nigerians to come do racist acts in this country, a la Jesse Smollett, right? This is MAGA country. No, this is your prison cell, and I hope you rot in it, Jesse. Abortion is murder. Myself all the time, doesn't it seem to you that progressive policies always lead to regressive results in the Black community? It's amazing, isn't it? Abortion, so progressive. They want to move that forward. We need abortion. We have Black women representing 6 to 7% of the population, and yet we account for almost 40% of all of the abortions that are performed in this country. We have a sick and twisted Governor Andrew Cuomo celebrating that you can rip fetuses, you can rip infants and babies from their mother's womb at 9 months. 9 months. It's absolutely sickening what we're talking about here. And who is that going to impact the most? In New York City, for those of you that don't know, more Black babies are aborted than born live. A hard-hitting truth is that the most unsafe place for a Black child is not on the streets, it's not when they see a police officer, it's in their mother's womb. How's that for a progressive policy? Is that what they're celebrating? The left needs God. Racially motivated police brutality is a myth. It's simply a myth. But father absence is not. The #1 issue facing Black America is that fathers have been removed from the home. It's that they have been incentivizing father absence. When the single motherhood rate jumps from 23% in the 1960s to a whopping 74% today, we have a problem. And it's a problem that the left does not want to talk about. It is the destruction and the breakdown of the family. There are 3.6 million black children living below the poverty line. There are 4 million Hispanic children that live below the poverty line. And yet Democrats want us to put illegals first. I say no thank you. I say build the wall. I say I don't want a Green New Deal. I want a Black New Deal. And the good news, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is that that actually can be free. It doesn't cost $93 trillion. First and foremost, stop selling us our own oppression. Stop taking away our self-confidence by telling us that we can't because of racism, because of slavery. I've never been a slave in this country. Stop telling us that we need to be obsessing over our past when we should be obsessing over our future and the potential that we have. Stop having a culture which tells us that we should want to be hip-hop artists and basketball players when we should want to be doctors and lawyers. We need to stop idolizing people like LeBron James and start idolizing people like Dr. Condoleezza Rice and Dr. Ben Carson. The theme today is what makes America great, and I'll tell you the answer. It's our philosophy. Margaret Thatcher said it best. Europe was created by history. America was created by a philosophy. Our philosophy, so perfectly laid out for us by Thomas Paine ahead of the Revolutionary War, is common sense and freedom. It was common sense then that the colonies shouldn't have been governed by the British monarchy. It was time for an American exit. It's common sense today that the Black community and the Hispanic community should not be governed by liberal ideology. It's time for a Blexit. It's common sense that the left does not care about racism, they don't care about sexism, they don't care about misogyny, they don't care about any of that stuff, they don't care about sexism. What they care about is the politicking of fear. When the left resorts to calling me, as I have read it, a racist, a sexist, a Nazi, because I really have the look going for me. And the words have completely lost their meaning. They have no arguments anymore. It's common sense to me that conservatives need to start invading culture, because we are the party that believes first and foremost in God. And in case you guys forgot, it was our belief in God and in Judeo-Christian values that inspired culture in the first place. I want to wrap this up by pleading with all of you to realize that the left is terrified right now because it takes just 5%. If we move the Black vote 5%, the path of least resistance to defeating the left is awakening the minority community, awakening Black America. We've been lied to, we've been abused, we have been used, and we are suffering. If we make an effort ahead of 2020 to embrace the Black community, to embrace culture, we can save this country. I want to thank Matt Schlapp for this amazing opportunity to stand on the stage. I want to thank all of you for hanging in. I know it has been a tough year being a fan of Candace Owens, constantly fighting, constantly punching back, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the grace of God, without your support, without your comments that helped me lift my head when it's been a bad day. I want to thank Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, the greatest student organization, and above all else, just to thank God, because a year and a half ago, I was on YouTube, and what makes America great is how quickly your life can transform if you stop viewing yourself as a victim and start viewing yourself as a victor and a piece of the American dream. God bless.
Time has expired. Ms. Owens.
That was unfair.
It was not unfair. You had plenty of extra time. Ms.
No,
Owens.
I did not.
Ms. Owens.
Mr. Chairman, ranking. There we go. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Mr. Collins, thank you for having me here today. I received word on my way in that many of the journalists were confused as to why I was invited, and none of them knew that I myself was the victim of a hate crime when I was in high school. That's something that very few people know about me because the media and the journalists and the left are not interested in telling the truth about me because I don't fit the stereotype of what they like to see in black people. I'm a Democrat, I support the President of the United States, and I advocate for things that are actually affecting the black community. I'm honored to be here today in front of you all because the person sitting behind me is my 75-year-old grandfather. I've always considered myself to be my grandfather's child, and I mean to say that my sense of humor, my passion, and my work ethic all comes from the man that is sitting behind me. My grandfather grew up on a sharecropping farm in the segregated South. He grew up in an America where words like racism and white nationalism held real meaning under the Democrat Party's Jim Crow laws. My grandfather's first job was given to him at the age of 5 years old, and his job was to lay tobacco out to dry in an attic in the South. My grandfather has picked cotton, and he has also had experiences with a Democrat terrorist organization of that time, the Ku Klux Klan. They would regularly visit his home and they would shoot bullets into it. They had an issue with his father, my great-grandfather. During my formative years, I had the privilege of growing up in my grandfather's home. It's going to shock the committee, but not once, not in a single breath of a conversation did my grandfather tell me that I could not do something because of my skin color. Not once did my grandfather hold a gripe against the white man. I was simply never taught to view myself as a victim because of my heritage. I learned about faith in God, family, and hard work. Those were the only lessons of my childhood. There isn't a single adult today that in good conscience would make the argument that America is a more racist or a more white nationalist society than it was when my grandfather was growing up. And yet we're hearing these terms sent around today because what they want to say is that brown people need to be scared, which seems to be the narrative that we hear every 4 years right ahead of a presidential election. Here are some things we never hear. 75% of the black boys in California don't meet state reading standards. In inner cities like Baltimore, within 5 high schools and 1 middle school, not a single student was found to be proficient in math or reading in 2016. The single motherhood rate in the black community, which was at 23% in the 1960s when my grandfather was coming up, is at a staggering 74% today. I am guessing there will be no committee hearings about that. There are more black babies aborted than born alive in cities like New York, and you have Democrat Governor Andrew Cuomo lighting up buildings to celebrate late-term abortions. I could go on and on. My point is that white nationalism did not do any of those things that I just brought up. Democrat policies did. Let me be clear. The hearing today is not about white nationalism or hate crimes. It's about fear-mongering, power, and control. It's a preview of a Democrat 2020 election strategy, same as the Democrat 2016 election strategy. They blame Facebook, they blame Google, they blame Twitter. Really, they blame the birth of social media, which has disrupted their monopoly on minds. They called this hearing because they believe that if it wasn't for social media, voices like mine would never exist, that my movement Blexit, which is inspiring black Americans to leave the Democrat Party, would have never come about, and they certainly believe that Donald Trump would not be in office today. Looking on the next thing to focus on now that the Russian collusion hoax has fallen apart. What they won't tell you about the statistics and the rise of white nationalism is that they've simply changed the data set points by widening the definition of hate crimes and upping the number of reporting agencies that are able to report on them. What I mean to say is that they're manipulating statistics. The goal here is to scare blacks, Hispanics, gays, and Muslims into helping them censor dissenting opinions, ultimately into helping them regain control of our country's narrative, which they feel that they lost. They feel that President Donald Trump should not have beat Hillary. If they actually were concerned about white nationalism, they would be holding hearings on Antifa, a far-left, violent, white gang who determined one day in Philadelphia in August that I, a black woman, was not fit to sit in a restaurant. They chased me out, they yelled race traitor to a group of black and Hispanic police officers who formed a line to protect me from their ongoing assaults. They threw water at me, they threw eggs at me, and the leftist media remained silent on it. If they were serious about the rise of hate crimes, they may perhaps be examining themselves and the hate that they have drummed up in this country. Bottom line is that white supremacy, racism, white nationalism, words that once held real meaning, have now become nothing more than election strategies. Every 4 years, the Black community is offered handouts and fear. Handouts and fear. Reparations and white nationalism. This is the Democrat preview. Of course, society is not perfectible. We've heard testimony of that today. There are pockets of evil that exist, and those things are horrible, and they should be condemned. But I believe the legacy and the ancestry of Black Americans is being insulted every single day. I will not pretend to be a victim in this country, and I know that that makes many people on the left uncomfortable. I want to talk about real issues in Black America. I want to talk about real issues in this country and real concerns. The biggest scandal, this is my last sentence, in American politics is that Democrats have been conning minorities into the belief that we are perpetual victims, all but ensuring our failure. Racial division and class warfare are central to the Democrat Party platform. They need blacks to hate whites, the rich to hate the poor, and soon enough it'll be the tall hate.
I just have to say that I object strenuously to your use of the word hilarious. To me, this feels a lot like your reaction to being named in one of these manifestos. Now, you're of course not responsible for the words of somebody writing that document, but I do think that laughing at it is a real problem because these are real families that are impacted by this violence. And I think our efforts towards talking about this have to start from a place of mutual respect, which is what I've heard from this side of the table. Now, the reason we don't have those numbers, I want those numbers as much as you do, but to say the numbers don't show something is simply not supported by the data.
Okay, and I have 38 seconds left, Ms. Mulligan, if you want to respond within that time.
The only thing I would add is that it's in the name. Terrorism, domestic terrorism, it terrorizes us. It terrorizes us in our homes. It terrorizes us in our schools. And to the points made by the other panelists, it is disproportionate to its impact on any individual life, and it's not.
You reject the idea it's something that doesn't matter or doesn't really matter?
Absolutely reject.
Okay. All right, so here's where we are. Every member now has had 5 minutes and...
Ms. Owens, obviously this is a gang up on you. You know, we're giving these witnesses the ability to do a rebuttal on you, and so you know, I find it unfair, Ms. Ballou. I mean, you know, candidly, for you to show mutual respect and then you to go after Ms. Owens, it's not appropriate. So, Ms. Owens, you can have 4 minutes and 34 seconds to respond. However,
yield for a second.
I'll yield.
Thank you. I believe, Ms. Owens, when you used the word hilarious, it was referencing the fact that no one had asked you a question. It wasn't to the subject matter of the hearing. Is that right?
That is correct.
And to have another witness insinuate something that is not accurate is just not appropriate, Mr. Chairman, for how witnesses are supposed to behave in front of this committee. I also think you didn't say it doesn't matter about the subject matter of today's hearing. You said there are other subjects that matter as well, and maybe we should spend some time on those. Is that accurate?
That is correct, and they matter much, 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 much more, and I have said that. I said that in my opening, and I will say it again. You know that white supremacy and white nationalism is ranks nowhere near the top of the issues that are facing Black America. And the reason that you are bringing them up in this room is because it is an attempt to make the election all about race, as the Democrats
Not in my case, Ms. Owens. I'm sorry. Please do not characterize my motive.
Mr. Chairman, it's my time.
Yeah, it's my time. You've got your time, Mr. Meadows. I'll give you 3 more seconds.
Every 4 years, you bring up race, and you knew exactly what I meant when I said hilarious, and you just tried to do live what the media does all the time to Republicans, to our president, and to conservatives, which you tried to manipulate what I said to fit your narrative, okay? I was not referring to the subject matter that is hilarious. I said it's hilarious that we are sitting in this room today, and I've got 2 doctors and a missus, and nobody can give us real numbers that we can respond to so we can assess how big of a threat this is. Because you know that it is not as big of a threat as you are trying to make it out to be so that you can manipulate. And the audacity of you to bring up the Christchurch shooting manifesto and make it seem as if I laughed at people that were slaughtered by a homicidal maniac is, in my opinion, absolutely despicable. And I think that we should be above that. to try to assign reality or any meaning to a homicidal maniac writing a manifesto, which, by the way, let the record show, also stated Spyro the Dragon, the child's cartoon, as a source of inspiration. He also cited Nelson Mandela as a source of information. I don't think that Nelson Mandela has inspired mosque shootings. You can correct me if you think I'm wrong. You would rather assign meaning to a homicidal maniac than to actually address the things that I said today that are actually harming Black America. Number one, father absence. Number two, the education system and the illiteracy rate. Illegal immigration ranks high, abortion ranks high, white supremacy and white nationalism, if I had to make a list again of 100 things, would not be on it. This hearing, in my opinion, is a farce, and it is ironic that you're sitting here and you're having 3 Caucasian people testify and tell you what their expertise are. Do I know what my expertise are? Black in America. I've been Black in America my whole life, all 30 years, and I can tell you that you guys have done the exact same thing every 4 years ahead of an election cycle, and it needs to stop.
I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Meadows. And now
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity to testify. I want to testify just as a Black American today, and I want to first start off by saying that white supremacy is indeed real, but despite the media's obsessive coverage of it, it represents an isolated, uncoordinated, and fringe occurrence within America. It's a fringe occurrence that is being used, in my opinion, by Democrats to scare Americans into giving up their votes to a party that can no longer win based on simple ideas, which is why we're seeing so many of these hearings back to back, despite other threats that are facing this nation. I want to reiterate that point. White supremacy is real, just as racism is real, but neither of these ideologies are real in this room. They have become mechanisms for the left to continue to call these hearings and to distract from much bigger issues that are facing this country and which threaten minorities. Much bigger issues that they are responsible for. White nationalism sounds a lot better as a threat than father absence. When are we going to call a hearing on the 74% of single motherhood rate in Black America today? My guess is probably never. Since Democrats are the author of that epidemic, which leaves us, Black Americans, 20 times more likely to end up in prison, 9 times more likely to drop out of high school, and 5 times more likely to lead a life in poverty and to commit crime. White nationalism also sounds a lot better than illiteracy rates. I'm assuming we're never going to call a hearing on that, which is a real epidemic that is facing Black Americans and minority Americans today. An epidemic which, by the way, has a lot closer of a tie to our nation's history of white supremacy. Slave codes in the early 19th century made it illegal for Black Americans to learn to read. Why? Because if slaves could read, they could access information. I don't believe that much has changed. On the most recent National Assessment of Educational Progress, just 17% of Black students scored proficient in reading at a 12th grade level. 83% of Blacks in America were not found proficient in reading at a 12th grade level. Are we going to have a hearing on that? Probably not. White nationalism also sounds a lot better than abortion as a threat, which has resulted in the slaughter of 18 million Black Americans since 1973 and points to a bigger crisis, which is the fact that the Black population growth has stagnated in this country. The crisis that in major cities like in New York, we have more Black babies that are being aborted than born alive. If we're talking about preserving lives and we're talking about white supremacy, we should probably have a conversation about that. But today, in this room, we're going to see Democrats try to connect the dots to white supremacy and the internet. So the question is why? So that people who have absolutely nothing to do with propagating white supremacy are censored, silenced, and controlled. What they are actually after is our permission to censor and silence and control any dissenting voices that go against the mainstream narrative that they wish to propagate. To give a glimpse into just how absurd and expansive the definition of white supremacy has become, I offer to the committee that I have been libeled and smeared by Democrat media cohorts as someone who supports white supremacy. You need but look at me to determine that that just isn't true. Why? Because I routinely say, Black people don't have to be Democrats. I am now considered somebody that is radicalizing people on the internet. What a radical idea. Black people waking up to the abuses and the Democrat Party, which has been instigated upon Black America over the last 60 years. There have been sincere attempts, just so everybody knows, to censor me on social media because I am radical. YouTube once censored me for criticizing Black Lives Matter. They reversed the censorship and they apologized and they called it a mistake. Facebook once censored me for calling out liberal supremacy as a threat facing Black America. What I said specifically was that in any community where liberal policies reign supreme, you will find that Black America is hurting. I stand by that assessment. Facebook reversed my censorship, apologized, and claimed it was a mistake. Of course, I'm fortunate that I have a big enough platform that when I get branded something extreme, I can reverse it, but the majority of Americans don't have that platform. The majority of Americans with dissenting opinions are silenced forever. Many words which have once held very serious meanings have come to take on a different definition over the last couple of years, as Democrats have desperately tried to grapple with the fact that they are no longer able to manipulate Americans with broad claims and broad strokes of racism, sexism, misogyny, and the like. Words like racism, which today most nearly means anything or anyone that disagrees with a liberal, and terms like white nationalism, which today and in this room and upon this floor most nearly means that it's election time, America. It's time for the left to do what they do best: divide, distract, and hope to keep their most important voting bloc to their party, which is Black Americans, angry and emotional and reactive enough to keep voting for the same party that has systematically destroyed our families, sent our men to prison, and deferred all of our dreams. I would close out by telling you that this is not going to work.
You can't awaken someone who's pretending to be asleep.